am so glad to have the charter members of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to be with us for a couple of days. It's been exciting to go back and think about what we did when we planned for the Dr. Martin Luther King Taskforce first holiday. But I want to talk to you about how this holiday began. If you remember that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968. It took 18 years for us to have a national holiday. And why was that? First of all, it was because of the Southern Democrats who thought that Dr. Martin Luther King was part of the Communist Party. So they did not want a holiday. But what they talked about Martin Luther King and having a holiday, and so people sent in 6 million petitions, and then 8 million petitions, until Ronald Reagan signed the law, but it wouldn't come into effect until 1986. Dr. Martin Luther King became the first African American to be celebrated or have a celebration. And that's what we're very proud about. And that's why we have a national holiday. And that's why we have in Southfield, we are the first to have a national holiday parade and event in the state of Michigan. And we remain the largest, and we still will always be the largest. And what do? Besides having a parade or parade for justice, we also have education programs. We have connected with Mexico, and we have a exhibit. We had a 2-year research of finding about Afro-Mexicans in Mexico. And we developed a 40-foot exhibit that has gone around in Michigan. And now it has been transferred to the World Beat Museum in San Diego. And they're having a reception for June 19th to show our exhibit. And they will have it there, and they're going to expand on it. So I'm just so pleased that we have done so much to be not only for Michigan, but now going into Mexico and everywhere else. And I'm just so proud of that. And some of the activities that we have is that we have youth that have gone to the South. In 2017 and 18, we had youth, 75 of them, that went to the South and found out about what happened in the South. We have had educational programs for Dr. Martin Luther King's philosophy on hatred and how we can get rid of that. And I'm just so proud that Martin Luther King Jr. came our way. I am so pleased that he was able to say that we should continue. And we continue today, we continue here in Southfield. Southfield has so much diversity. Southfield is a home for so many people who are different in their relations, they're different in their Christianity and Muslims and all sorts. The different people that come in and out. Southfield is the center of it all. And I'm so proud to be living in Southfield and being part of this wonderful world. That's it.
Hello, I'm Mayor Ken Siver, and back when Martin Luther King began, I was at the time Director of Information Services for the Southfield Public Schools. And Barbara Talley had contacted me because of my various community activities and said, would you join us in forming a Martin Luther King task force in Southfield? Barbara's a very persuasive person. It didn't take any convincing me. I was certainly wanted to be on her team. She'd been a neighbor of mine for years, and so we have quite a bit of history that predates actually Martin Luther King. But I do want to reminisce a little bit. The actual first Martin Luther King observance in the city of Southfield was in January of 1984. This is a year before the first Peace Walk. We had a Sunday afternoon program in room 115 of Parks and Rec. And I believe it was organized by the Civic Citizens, a group that was in existence at the time, if I'm remembering correctly. One of the things that I do remember about that that afternoon, that Sunday afternoon, was that we had a phenomenal gospel choir that just rocked the room. We also, of course, had various remembrances of the message of Martin Luther King, which has always been peace, brotherhood, nonviolence. So we formed the Martin Luther King Task Force a year later, 1985. And again, 84, 85, we didn't have a national Martin Luther King holiday. So we were organized this walk. I'm not sure exactly what the city thought, but the city workers were in their offices. And this was on Monday, Martin Luther King's birthday, and we walked from Hope United Methodist Church. At the time, it was the Congregational Church prior to Hope's moving there. And we walked from the church, as we've done for decades, to the Southfield Pavilion. But one thing that I remember was we didn't have the whole street. The street was open to traffic, and so the Southfield police were out, and we were on one edge of the street walking towards City Hall. And then we had our program, which was organized by our committee at the time. And I just remember sitting in the audience and looking up at the offices that are above the pavilion, and city staff is at their desks working. So we also worked on working to get the national holiday recognized, which soon came along. And then subsequent walks, we had the whole street. The street was shut down. And I'm very proud of the fact that this was Michigan's first Martin Luther King Peace Walk, and it has consistently been the largest. Year after year after year. We have tremendous turnout, And I'm very proud of our Martin Luther King Task Force because it's still going strong, and it has branched out to do other things than just organize a walk or celebrate a holiday in honor of Dr. King. The task force has a whole number of activities that it offers, particularly for youth. And as a former teacher in Southfield schools, I think this is so important that the younger generation understand and not take for granted their civil rights, as well as the right to vote, housing, employment, everything right down the line, because that wasn't always the case. And so we have a whole education component. We've done historically black college tours. We've done forums, any number of things. So and continue to recognize community youth. So we're going strong, and we'll keep on marching, because sadly I have to say that today we need to keep walking. We absolutely need to keep walking and demonstrating for peace, nonviolence, and brotherhood. Thank you very much.
More than a year before Southfield residents sat down to discuss the formation of a Martin Luther King event, the U.S. government signed into law a national holiday honoring the life and accomplishments of a Black American. The Martin Luther King holiday represents the first time in the history of this country that a man of color is honored with a holiday all Americans had to recognize. By way of background, the 1980s marked a time many of my brothers and sisters were able to reach success. A success that is the direct result of the passage of the 1960s Civil Rights Act. And when we found success in numbers, we wanted and we sought what everyone else did. A number of us moved from the city of Detroit and other communities to a community recognized for its exemplary schools, high-valued housing, access to highways, and great public services. We purchased bigger houses and began preparing our children for brand-name colleges, preparing them, hopefully, for future success. With great hope and anticipation, we moved to the city of Southfield. Between 1980 and 1990, that same period of time the MLK walk started, the Black population in Southfield increased from about 7,000 to about 21,000, threefold increase. Black Americans at the time had on average more intact family, larger annual income, superior education, greater wealth, superior job responsibility than those Americans who found the need to move away from the city. We were met by white flight and a government that was not very happy to see us. A government that did what it could to downplay our role in the community and in government. A government that actually asked us to move to another community with the suggestion that maybe they would want you. It was also in the 80s that the public began to believe that the city of Southfield had reached a racial tipping point, that the percentage of blacks in the city had increased to a point of no return, that the city is in a permanent decline because only blacks would purchase a home in Southfield, and that all current homeowners would be forced to sell their home for pennies on the dollar. The then mayor later stated in a book entitled Devil's Night and Other True Tales of Detroit that if the city became too black, our streets would become filthy. While another government official stated in the same publication that quality of life in Southfield can only be preserved by a quantity of whites. It is with this background that a group of citizens came together to commemorate the holiday that now symbolizes brotherhood among men and to accept the challenges made real by the promises of America. As a land of freedom, equality, opportunity, and brotherhood, this group, we're made up of black folk and white folks, local leaders, clergy from multiple denominations, politicians, businessmen, men, women, NAACP, and school leaders, community activists with Barbara Talley as its head. As citizens, we gathered with the audacity to tell the city of Southfield that we are here and that we are expecting to be a part of this community forever. At a time when elected officials for the city of Southfield downplayed the black population within the city, at a time when conventional wisdom demanded that we keep our presence in the city on the download, and that's when the Martin Luther King Taskforce boldly stood up and announced that we are here and that we are here to stay. Further, with this organization, that we are not living in a black community, nor are we living in a white community, but we are living in our community. And that if you are willing to accept the challenges to live in a land of freedom, equality, and opportunity, we ask that everyone join. And so the Martin Luther King Task Force extends this challenge to you on this day. Today, the annual MLK celebration has grown to be a much bigger event than I ever anticipated. However, the message today is as it was back in the 1980s. I have much gratitude for those who are now engaged in the difficult task of carrying on the banner, and I am thankful that I was able to play even a small role in the growth of this event. Today, I say to today's leaders, carry on. Today, I say to those participants, carry on. Today, I say to our residents and a government that is now a part of our community, carry on. The mission is clear, and it is not, but is not complete. Today, with the particular insanity in our political life and the kinds of stresses we see each and every day, the message of Martin Luther King is more important than ever. As former president of Southern Oakland County NAACP, we joined the organization as a participant. We would still participate today, and I hope for your participation too. Thank you so much.
In a previous lifetime, back in the 20th century, the effort was finally successful in getting Congress to establish the Martin Luther King national holiday. And we had a little bit of time to prepare for that. And in our community, we are fortunate that we had Barbara Talley, who was able to get a couple dozen of the movers and shakers and active people together to see what kind of a way we would be celebrating this event, this brand new holiday. Meetings were held and suggestions were made, and finally it was agreed that it should involve a peace walk in memory of all the marches that Dr. King had been involved in on behalf of civil rights, and then later with regard to the Poor People's Campaign. And through her efforts, the first march was on the very first Martin Luther King national holiday. And over 2,000 people walked at that time through the January cold over to the Southfield Pavilion for a wonderful program where we had an actual participant in some of the events that we were commemorating, able to share his memories with us. And since then, every year, that march has continued, even during the car caravan of COVID. But every year there was a commemoration. But it didn't stop there. She's a go-getter, and she made sure that this was expanded to a year-long effort of education and events, especially directed at young people, and at the whole idea of nonviolence. As I'm recording this, we're seeing an uptick in hatred and violence all over the globe, but especially in our country. And we need these commemorations, we need these activists, we need these events so that the efforts of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. will be instilled in all of us to teach us what we can do to make this a better, more peaceful, more lovable community, country, and world for us to live in and raise our children and grandchildren and on into the future. So this was a very important start those many years ago. I had no longer been on the city council. Barbara Talley was still on the city council and was able to get the pavilion available. There was not universal support for this at the beginning, but over the years, people came to see how important this was to the community and to our future. So it's great to be here and to have seen so many of the people who were involved way back then and expanded it to award programs and competitions and educational programs and displays and funding a sculpture and on and on and on. It's just been an amazing opportunity to take this national holiday and make it a reality for us in our community.
We started the walk from North Congregation Church that is located on Civic Center Drive. And we walked to the pavilion on Civic Center Drive, and it was about a mile. So we invited churches, and we invited organizations, and people just came out. They bought their signs, their banners, and we walked. It was cold that day, but nobody minded being cold. We all just huddled together and marched and sang. And we got to the pavilion, and we had a program that we had planned for the people. And we had already invited guest speakers. We had churches to come out and perform. New Hope Missionary Baptist Church was one of the ones that came. The whole choir came and sung songs. And then we had different nationalities to perform. They had their costumes on. They were beautiful costumes, and they performed very well. And it was just exciting because it's a diversity city, and everyone was enjoying everybody's nationality. And so it was a great performance. And we also had tables set up so that organization could display their information about their organizations. We had restaurants come out and donate their food. There was plenty of food around the wall. And we also had asked stores to donate water and fruit and snacks. So there was plenty of food around the area. But the Taste Fest we named it, was after the program was over with. So people ate afterwards. But in between all that, it was a program with diversity. One year we had an artist to come out to create a Martin Luther King bust for us. And right now the bust is sitting in the Southfield Library. Now, when we started this, my daughter was a teenager, and she didn't know anything about Martin Luther King. And so I brought her along with me to plan this Martin Luther King. So she ended up with us on the charter member. So her name is Tammy Wright Williams. To this day, Tammy is performing different plans and on different committees in Dallas, Texas, working on some parts of Martin Luther King's in that state. So I just want to say that we are so proud to be able to do this in our city because our mayor stood with us, Our pastor stood with us, the community stood with us, and we have come together in this city to hopefully Martin Luther King is proud of us because we are trying to do what he started out doing with his struggle, where he had to go through a lot to get to where we are today.
I remember Mrs. Barbara Talley, the former council lady, asking us to join her to be part of the Martin Luther King Peace Walk. We was excited about it. We didn't know exactly what we was going to do, but we all put our heads together and we was able to come up with a plan. And one of the things that we did do, we took a trip to Atlanta, Georgia, and we met with I don't know if we met with Mrs. King or not, but I know that she knew we was there, and they received us warmly. We was able to tour the church, and we also went to not a party, but a celebration that night, and it was all types of peoples there from different nationalities, and it was very, very special. And one thing that I brought away from that as we came back from the trip, there was 4 of us that went. It was Mrs. Cooper and Mrs. Alston, Councilwoman Barbara Talley, and myself. As we came back on the plane, we was exchanging notes, what we brought from that. And the way that we got the word out, we told the kids in school, told our neighbors, everybody that really came in contact with, and we sent out flyers and things. But the highlight was when we went to Atlanta to visit, and that really inspired us to want to do even more. So after that, we planned, and if it was a misunderstanding, we would pray about it and decide, well, we need to change that and do something else, and that's what we did. And it was very helpful for us to do that, and because it brought back the unity, and we wanted to present what Dr. King really stood for, and that was peace and love and respect for all peoples.
The thing I remember, I think, the most was the day that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. I remember the day, I remember where I was, I remember how I felt, and it wasn't really good. So about, 15, 20 years later, when Barbara Talley decided to pull together a task force for the city of Southfield to create a Martin Luther King Peace Walk, I was all for it. I just jumped on the opportunity because there was nothing more that I wanted to do to recognize and to celebrate the life of this wonderful man, a man of peace, man of equality. So I was very, very glad to be able to participate. So when the Peace Walk actually got together the first year, there were so many people that came out. There were hundreds and hundreds of people. And they came from many walks of life, many different cultures, many faiths, many different ages, just from all around the city of Southfield, and some even came from other communities. And we had such a really good outpouring of people. I still don't understand how we were able to pull it together because email wasn't even invented back then. So we had no way of electronically letting people know what was going on in the community. So long story short, it was a very successful event. I think that someone said it was like over 1,000 people that attended. And from what I understand also, the event was the largest peace walk in the state of Michigan, and from what I understand, it still is. So that's really great. So I was a resident of Southfield for about 35 years, and I think I still call this home because I am in the city of Southfield at least, I'd say, 3 to 4 times every week. I still have my P.O. box here. That's where I get all my mail. Because I live in an apartment building and I don't want my mail to go there. So I'm in the city of Southfield all the time, many times a week, and I think I'll continue to call this my home.
In my mind, there was never any question that Southfield would have a significant celebration for the very first Martin Luther King Jr. national holiday on January 20th, 1986. I was honored to be asked by Barbara Talley to be a charter member of the task force to plan the event. It might come as a surprise to some people that Southfield was the largest city in Michigan to plan an event to honor Dr. King's legacy. We were already a diverse city at that time. We prided ourselves on our inclusiveness and diversity, and on the public ways in which we celebrated our vibrant, multi-ethnic, multicultural community. For years, Southfield hosted an ethnic festival for the entire community and was a place where our country's newest citizens could take their oath. One of my own first experiences with the city was as an employee with the Home Information Center. My job was to be an ambassador to the many large corporations in Southfield and to suggest to them to send their new employees to us so we could educate them on the value of living in the city. Later, I became a city council member in 1981, and Barbara Talley became the first Black councilwoman in 1983. From the beginning, we were aligned on issues that we thought would make Southfield a better place for our community. For example, I really think we were ahead of our time in creating a tree ordinance that recognized the importance of preserving trees during business development and residential projects. Another commitment with regard to the environmental issues was our Rouge River Rescue. We annually invested in and participated in keeping this important waterway clean of garbage and other debris. So I knew Barbara was thinking big about a Dr. King celebration. She didn't just suggest that we commemorate Dr. King on that inaugural day. She tasked us with creating something that would become a city tradition. And we were a group prepared to do so. At the time the task force began its work, I had been a city council member for 5 years of my 18 years of service, and was familiar with the fellow task force members. I think Mayor Ken Siver was a journalist and a teacher at Southfield High, and I think he must have been involved because he would bring the kids along on this project. We wanted students involved. It was important to us that they would learn from this experience and continue to support it. Reverend Mark Jensen was at North Congregational Church, a kind, open-minded person leading a large congregation that we knew would be involved. Other members of the task force were equally committed to our city's goals. It seemed to me that our task force was a reflection of our community, and it seems to me now that I think about it that this certainly was one of Dr. King's many missions, that people from all backgrounds come together for a common purpose. The lore is that someone at the meeting said, "I see a peace walk." And from there, our annual tradition was born. I loved the idea. In fact, I became a councilwoman because I was willing to walk all over the city, engaging with residents and understanding their needs and concerns. There is no better way for people to meet someone new and realize our common interests and goals than to walk alongside them. So the Peace Walk was perfect as a commemoration of Dr. King's life and legacy. And the walk always finished in the Southfield Pavilion, where all the walkers and all those unable to walk gathered to further honor Dr. King's memory in song, dance, poetry, and speeches. This Dr. King celebration represents to me the best of what Southfield was and continues to be.
Good afternoon. The visionary leadership and direction of our founder, Barbara Talley, has transformed a local civic group into an organization for all people. The collective and united efforts of each founding member of the MLK Task Force established a posture for all people as participants. The MLK Task Force brought people of all ethnic groups together for an informative program that helped unite our city. This grassroots organization is still functioning today by two former neighbors, engaging city officials, churches, schools, businesses, corporations, and community citizens. These two known persons are Barbara Talley, former councilwoman, and Ken Siver, our current mayor. After they overcame some obstacles, they continued with their mission and purpose for the task force. Many other city officials and community persons work year-round with the annual participants that supported the walk to City Hall for over 35 years. This Freedom Walk played a major role in validating the status of Southfield to be the center of it all. It was a peaceful event that included everybody in our society. The multiple activities of the task force are still bearing fruit today by the implementation that the founders and continuous efforts of all active new members. The historical achievements and significant contribution of the task force should position the city of Southfield to be the state's model city. This accomplishment could also be explored and looked into by the city officials for a national recognition award. As a founding member and official photographer for many years, and given 40 years of service to the Southfield Emergency Management Division, is my contribution for helping to make this city, to make the improvements and changes to this great city of Southfield. Thank you.
I was asked why I wanted to be involved in the Martin Luther King walk, peace walk. I think that my interest in that kind of thing really came a long time developing, kind of like a journey in life. I took a lot of courses in race and nationality at the University of Minnesota. And I also spent some time with Jesse Owens, which was a real treat. And those relationships don't go away. Mahalia Jackson was a speaker at a small dinner I had in graduate school. And again, all of those things develop over time into relationships not only with people but also with values and principles, which I think fortunately rubbed off on me. When I came to Southfield, I came to North Congregational Church, which is where the walk has been for many, many years. Now it's a Methodist church, but we related to lots of people, and the congregation related to lots of people. And we ultimately sold it to an African American church, but we also had space for Family Victory Fellowship, a church that's still on 10 Mile, and we have been gone from that area in a lot of years, but always coming back to Southfield and having good relationships with people. Barbara Talley is really the one who put her hand up and got me interested in being actively involved in the event. And there with the people on the board, the committee, I found people that I had things in common with, things that I could share in principles and values again, and also be in some part a mentor, a teacher, and a friend. The good thing is I also learned that it affected me and it affected the people around me, and my family, and my church, and in the community. You don't just walk and then stop. You walk and continue to relate to people. And these are people who are doctors, lawyers, bus drivers, parents, and ultimately, again, friends with principles that you share. And we, of course, hope that that would continue for many people for much longer than even now. The speakers that we have had at the walk have been excellent too in sharing themselves and what they find important, as I did, as they do, as we do with our children and our grandchildren. To think that there were 1,200 people approximately at that first walk 38 years ago, and some of those people are still there, and then there are new people, and they're bringing their friends, their families, and their children. We listened, of course, to a lot of the music that was good for us and good for others, and got us together. It's a rich experience. It's multi-generational, and you cannot argue with the values that people have who participate.
Hi, my name is Reverend Gerald Cardwell, and as a charter member of the Martin Luther King Jr. Task Force here in Southfield, I was honored when we first got started to represent the city's first Black Greek organization, fraternal organization, as president of the Southfield Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. From that platform, we participated in the first Peace Walk, and since our inception that same year, we nurtured young people through our high school Kappa League and awarded over $800,000 in scholarships to students throughout the years. Serving as a board member of the Interfaith Leadership Council of Detroit today, I have engaged leaders of various faiths to come to realize, in order to build on and sustain the unity of community here in the city of Southfield, we must have a sense of belonging to one another. The hierarchy of human needs places belonging as the third need, but we must look at it as the first need, human need, as we enter the world. Babies have needs and have to belong to meet their needs. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in his efforts to bring unity, saw the need to bring us together and to have us know that we belong to each other, no matter our race, color, or creed. We continue to march for that purpose and to demonstrate our love of community and our belongingness to each other. Let me close by offering this prayer. Lord, remind us of our basic need for belongingness. the first human need, basic human need. We need each other to accomplish each of our life's goals, engage us to engage one another with compassionate listening, and not fear each other and see others as a threat. Let us belong to something larger than ourselves through you who is the sovereign God we serve. Let us attend to the suffering of others that we don't know in a world that is ravaged by war and economic calamity. We pray for peace in Ukraine and ask that the Russian leadership come to its senses and realize no nation can force itself on another. We pray for the conflict in Africa and other parts of the world. For that matter, help us to know no religious belief can force its will on another. We hope you, God, can help us to remember we are all your children. Let love and peace abide where hate and strife exist. Let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And in my faith tradition, I pray this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.